Thanks for coming. Thank you. Hey, nice to see you guys. Thank you very much for coming. My fourth book I wrote by myself, actually. I used a co-author in the first three. Her name was Mariana Jameson. It was fantastic. But this book didn't need what I used Mariana before in the previous three, which is spying on the internet, things like that. She's a CIA agent who liked to write stuff on the side, which is really interesting to hear because Mariana Jameson's not her real name. I don't think I know her real name actually. But she's fantastic. But I wrote this one by myself, and it's my fourth novel. And when I write books, and when I wrote this one, I use a lot of news stories and things like that. So Blackmail Earth is about a woman who is, of course, the female morning meteorologist on the national morning newscast, sort of like the Today Show. And her name's Jenna Withers. And she's on the President's Council for Climate Change. She's a really well-noted meteorologist. But in the book, I wrote stuff about, I read stories about these guys who wanted to slow the planet's warming. And they figured out if you dump iron ore into the ocean, you can cool the ocean. If you cool the ocean, you cool the planet. So that's how you would possibly combat global warming, or climate change as it's called now. But if you use too much iron ore, then you cool the planet too much, and then that's the same reverse effect as if you had global warming. So you could cool the planet too much, you could heat the planet too much. So I thought about that news story. Then I thought about another news story that I read about Wiccans. Everybody know who Wiccans are? They're witches, good witches, actually. And so I read a story about our men and women who are in service and serving in Afghanistan and Iraq. If they get killed in the line of combat, they want their Wiccan stuff on their grave at Arlington Cemetery. That was a story in the Times I read. And I thought that was really interesting because I didn't know much about Wiccans. And so I wove some Wiccans into the book who live in the Catskills. The book has romance in it. A lot of nice romance in it. There's a nice hunky gentleman in the book. His name is Defoe. I just like that name. It was a real hunky. He was a computer hacker, but now he has a dairy farm in the Catskills. And so they have a romance going. And so it has a lot of intrigue in it. It has. I really like this book. It's my favorite book, and not because I wrote it by myself, but it just has a lot of funny things that I would write in telling a story, and it has a lot of me in this book. Not that the others didn't, because Marianne is such a good writer, and we wrote together and collaborated on our books. But this one has jihad in it. There are terrorists that hijack ships full of iron ore, and they want to dump it into the ocean unless the United States turns off a coal-burning power plant, one every hour. And the reason I wrote that is I read a news story every year in the Maldives, and that's where this book is centered, in the Maldives Islands. The president there and his council, they have a cabinet meeting at the bottom of the ocean every year, once a year. And they put on scuba gear and they go to the bottom of the ocean and have a cabinet meeting. And it's because they believe that all the excesses of the United States and things that we put in the atmosphere and carbon and warming the planet that's going to raise the oceans, that one day the oceans will cover the Maldives Islands. So they do that in protest. So I wove all that into this book, Blackmail Earth, and it's a great beach read. I hope you enjoy it. And it was a lot of fun writing it. And Harlan Coben gave me a nice quote on the book, and so did George Stephanopoulos. And then I wrote this labor of love in my den, which I just really loved writing this book. I wrote it in a short amount of time. I wrote it in 2 months. And then, of course, it took about a year to take care of the pictures and the graphics and all that sort of thing. And so I called it It's Raining Fish and Spiders because there are tornadoes that go over lakes and ponds and things and scoop up frogs, fish. They would go by construction sites and pick up nails and boards and chickens, and over time they dump these things in different places around the world. There's about 100 to 500 instances in a year around the earth where a storm picks up something and carries it over miles and miles and miles of land and then drops it on an unsuspecting populace. And so that's why I named it that. And there's a picture of some spiders that were actually falling from the sky in the book in Australia. I don't have a picture of it. I tried to buy a picture of this, but there was actually a picture in Australia where a storm picked up some fish near the coastline of Brisbane, and on the northern coast and carried the fish up into the thunderstorm and froze the fish in the hailstones. So when the fish and the hailstone landed, it was frozen fish in hailstone, in ice. It was amazing. It was an amazing story. What's that?
Mrs. Balls?
From Gorton's. Yeah. So it was already fish frozen in ice. So, but there's a lot of that happens, and so I wrote that in this book. But this book is perfect for kids of your age, third grade on up to about eighth grade. It has easy to understand graphics. I paid a guy to do the graphics, and then I looked and found pictures. And I loved calling people and asking for pictures. I found a great-great-grandson of Currier and Ives, and there's two great scenes that Currier and Ives did in Central Park, the sledding in Central Park and the ice skating at Woolman Rink in Central Park are in here. And I found the guy, my publisher said, oh, they'll never give you that picture. They'll charge you $1,000 a shot for that. And so I found the guy who's in Colorado Springs living. I said, I'm writing this kid's book. And I said, I'd really like to use those two that your great-grandfather did. And he said, yeah, you can have it. Send me $100. So I sent him books and $100. So that was nice. But then you had the other end of the spectrum where I found this great picture. There's a picture of the book in the lightning section where there's a child's hair standing on end. And that's because of the static energy that's in the thunderstorm, and your hair stands on end when lightning is about to strike. So the picture in the book is great. It's a really good one. But I found one that I really liked a little bit better because it was a young lady and her hair was really long. And it was all standing up. Denise, it was like your hair. It was on her shoulder, and the lightning was about to hit, and I mean the hair was straight up, and it was out everywhere. So I found this guy. He lived in Mendocino, California, and his pictures. The picture's on the internet, but to use it in a book, you must ask for permission. So the picture's on the internet, so anybody can see it. So I call the guy and I go, "Love the picture of your daughter with with their hair." Yeah, he goes, "That's a great shot." I go, "Yeah, I'm doing this kid's book. I'd like to put your daughter's picture in the kid's book." He goes, "Oh yeah, you can have it. That'll be great." I said, "I'll send you a copy of the book." And we're talking and going along, and I go, "Yeah, well, thank you very much." He goes, "Yeah, but I'm gonna need $1,200." I don't even know how he got that number. When you throw that number out at me, I said, "Well, I can't give you $1,200." I said, "I don't have $1,200." And so I said, "I'm getting pictures for nominal fees and fair prices." And I said, "Some of them are free." I said, "But it's a book for children." I said, "It's a book I don't care to make a dime on." I mean, Pat, don't take me wrong. I would like to make a dime. But I mean, it's a book that every kid needs. It's a great gift. It's a great because for kids, it's a very easy book to read. You open it, and here's a title. Animals in snow. Ooh, I want to read about that. The blizzard 1887 that wiped out millions of free-range cattle. I wrote a story in here about going. There was a couple that was just here talking about their favorite thing in the world is go to Mount Washington, New Hampshire. Well, I wrote a story about going to 70 below zero. That's when I was trapped on Mount New Hampshire in a raging snowstorm. The winds were 140 miles, 160 miles per hour, and it was 70 below. And so we went outside, and I'm just still a little kid. I'm a 52-year-old kid, and so I thought, well, it's 120, 130 mile an hour winds outside. I gotta go outside. Experience what that's like. I've experienced 70 and 80 in a hurricane. I want to know what it's like in this kind of situation, because that's the spot on Earth that the highest winds are clocked in the world is in Mount Washington at 243 miles per hour. So I wanted to go be out in that, and so I thought, well, that's pretty cool. So I thought, what if you threw hot coffee in the air at 70 below at 120 miles an hour? Went and got a picture of hot coffee. And here are these scientists, and I'm making coffee. I'm standing by the coffee machine. Just waiting for the coffee, just dripping in the pot. And so the cameraman's standing by the back door, and I go, as soon as it's done, we're breaking through the door. So we're breaking through the door, and I'm going to throw this hot coffee up in the sky and see what happens. So, the bunker there and I called it a bunker, but the building at Mount Washington is built. It's a cement, steel encased kind of round disc, so the wind goes right over it. So most of the wind all the time travels from west to east because Mount Washington's proximity to Canada, United States, and the Atlantic Ocean is why the wind with the jet stream runs from west to east across Mount Washington. So the coffee's just steaming hot, and I take the pitcher of coffee, and I just open the door, and now I'm dressed like I'm on the moon. You know, I mean, I got 3 of those Eastern Mountain coats on that go down to here. I've got goggles on, because the moment you step into 130 mile an hour, 70 below, you know, it'll burn you. So flash freeze you. So open the door, throw the hot coffee up in the air, and it sounds like thunder. It goes crack, and it turns into brown dust. It just blows away across the top of the mountain. It was really cool. So I had a great time in Mount Washington. I got too much exposure out there. I lost some fingernails, I lost some toenails, and the end of my nose got burned off. I had on 2 face gaiters, and still the end of my nose got burned off. So, which was good because I had a really big nose at the time. And so it was a cheap way to have plastic surgery. I didn't have to really pay for that. It just kept falling off, turning black and falling off till it all got well eventually. But this has more than you'll ever want to know about things like snowflakes. There's more than one different kind of snowflake. It was great for me to research into this book, and you learn about the sun, and you learn the lightning is hotter than the sun, and all kinds of cool facts like that. So that's why I wrote this book, because there is no book like it for kids anywhere. You can take a map of the United States, and you can take a dart, and you can throw it at any place on that map of the United States, and you can go there, and you can go to their school system, and you'll ask them, what do they have for weather? And they'll tell you, well, we have 1 of 2 choices. We have a sheet that we give the kids once a week about weather, and they get a different sheet for 6 weeks. Or we have this huge science book, which is about this thick, and it has every kind of science in it. It has physical science. It has earth science. It has levers, pulleys, mechanical science. It's got every science in it. And about 10 pages of it are on weather. And that's a book that a kid will never keep. You know, you give it back to the school district hands it out again. This is a book that a kid can have forever. And the only thing that will change in it is some of the records will change. And we'll update the book every year to reflect that. You know, most hurricanes, coldest temperatures, that sort of thing. There's graphics in it on how sleet, snow, freezing rain work. You would be surprised if you walked out there right there on the avenue and asked a kid, tell me the difference between freezing rain, sleet, and snow. They can't tell you. You know, they can tell you how it's made. Freezing rain actually starts as snow, but it ends up in freezing rain. Well, how does that happen? How does snow start out as snow and turns into sleet? That's how it happens. It's the 3 forms of precipitation. Everybody gets confused. And then ask kids the difference between sleet and hail, and you don't get a good answer for that one either. But so that's why I put it in this book. So it made it really easy to understand. And so even if you're just a beginning level person who likes weather, it's perfect for them. So, so I want to sign your books, and I'll answer any questions. I know there's probably not many questions unless we want to talk about climate change is off the table. And we can talk about climate change, right? That's just always the first question I get.
Is this
Yeah,
part
do you
of the
believe
series?
it? What's that?
Is this part of the series? I haven't read any. I'll be honest.
No, they're not all connected. The first 2 books have a couple of characters in the next book, but the one thing that's in all my books is about weather. My first book is Category 7, and it was a bestseller on the New York Times bestseller list. And that's about a guy that figures out how to make weather. He makes a hurricane. He points it toward New York City. Then Frozen Fire was my second book, and that's about the world's largest fossil fuel, which is methane hydrate. It sits at the bottom of the ocean, 200 feet down below. There was a story about that the other day. And people do mine it. The Russians have mined it, the Japanese mine it, and you can burn methane hydrate, and it burns absolutely clean. It doesn't harm the atmosphere, like when you burn coal or you burn oil. But the methane hydrate does blow up stuff, which it blew up the well in the Gulf of Mexico. There was methane hydrate in the pipeline, and there's supposed to be a thing called a blowout preventer, and it's supposed to let that out and escape in the atmosphere. You already inducted? That was it?
That was it. I made it.
Wow. Did you get out on one knee? They knight you?
I said I do. The second time I said I do in my life.
Wow.
Only the second time.
So that's Frozen Fire, and then Dry Ice is about the findings of Nikola Tesla, how you can use the ionosphere of the planet and use radio waves to create weather, electromagnetic radio waves. ELFs they're called, extra low frequency radio waves. And so Nikola Tesla figured that out in 1900. And there's an antenna array that's in use today that employs those types of radio waves for all kinds of means around the planet. So like if we have a submarine that's in Antarctica or the Arctic Circle, how do we talk to it? Well, we use the ionosphere of the planet and use the radio waves all the way around the planet. And so that's a book about, that's the basis of the book, and it has a lot of spying on the internet and government stuff, and people want to use the ray to create good weather around the planet and feed the masses, but there's other people who want to use it as a weapon. And Nikola Tesla figued out how to do both, how to use it as a weapon and how to use it. And then this is my fourth book, which is basically about weather jihad and climate change and all that sort of stuff. Because I kept looking at a lot of climate change. I want to write a book about climate change and geo-weather engineering and make it entertaining. And so, so there you have it. Books 4 and 5.
How long did it take you to write this?
12 months. I had 9 months to write this book. I sat down and really had a good time writing this book. I really got into a rhythm after writing the first 3 and working on the first 3. So, you know, I do it. I hear a lot of really famous authors talk about how they write. They sit down, they can write a book, and those people are brilliant to be able to sit down and do characters and give them a life and make decisions and all that and go from beginning to end. And that's called character arcs, you know. But me, I do it the old-fashioned 7th grade way, and that is you make an outline and you write a topical sentence, you know, and just write that. And I found it was, for me, it was the easiest thing to do. So I spit this one out in about 9 months. You know, it's funny after you write these books. You know, after I wrote my second or third one, people would ask me questions about Category 7, my first book. I couldn't remember the characters. I was like, okay, let me go back. What did I write? Oh, jeez. And now that I've written Blackmail Earth, you know, people are asking about characters in Frozen Fire. I was like, what's her name? Vicky? Because they become, so I can tell you every character in this book right now, because they become your children. You know, you're in the shower, you know, all right, well now, Jenna's in love with Defoe, but you know, they're going to go on this trip, and then these North Koreans are going to try and capture Sang-mi and all the Wiccans, and then there's a murder in this book. My first really, I mean, I killed people with weapons, but there's a murder in this book. So I really like it. There's the sheriff, and they think it's the high school, you know, football player and all that sort of stuff, and they're up in the Catskills, and then it comes down to New York City, and then there's, I'm kind of giving the book away, aren't I? A big shootout on this TV studio. I always wanted to have a big shootout on the news set. Because I used to think,
you wish for.
I mean, you know, it could happen any day in the world we live in now. But I always thought, you know, someday there's probably going to be somebody who's going to come through that door. But we had a person one time at Channel 7 bashing all the windows with a sledgehammer. You may remember that on Columbus Avenue. And so now we have a glassed-in studio. And when they first built it, I thought, you know, we had a guy with a sledgehammer that bashed in the glass we used to have. But this glass is bulletproof and all this other stuff, bomb-proof, all this other stuff. So a lot of changes been made since then. So I thought, what if some jihadists or some terrorists wanted to get on the news set? What would that be like? So I wrote that in this book. So I hope you enjoy it. It is a great summer beach read. And if it's not, let me know.
Great, thank you, Bill.
All right, thank you.
So if you guys